Minus 15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Amy Jennings, pinch hitting for Matt Bonaparte today. If you are following along with us live on YouTube and Facebook, it is probably pandemonium. I mean, we've got a new host. We're in a new room because there are more important television things happening in our podcast studio. Chaos today, Amy.
It was probably a little bit of a jump scare. I know that people at home are used to, Matt's lovely beard,
Sure,
shares on your regular podcast set. So I'm sorry, probably can't live up to Matt. Don't have as good of takes, funny jokes, the beard. I can't name all the presidents in order.
Matt Bonaparte certainly can.
And the years that they were in office, so.
Well, Matt Bonaparte has some uniquely special skills. We just learned before this show, Amy, that you can't whistle, which is not one of your favorite skills. Yeah, I mean, we need somebody. So did your dream of being a third base coach just kind of die when you couldn't whistle to get somebody's attention?
Pretty much everything. At least I could be like a basketball ref, and then I have a whistle. I just
because they give you a whistle for that.
Right, but it's the natural ability that I just don't have.
Yeah.
I used to practice in high school, nonstop in class, and the teacher would be like, Amy, you've got to stop. You're disturbing the whole class.
Yeah, we're going to be half an hour through this show, and you're just going to be trying to whistle to yourself in the corner, which is a really nice noise for an audio-only podcast.
Please leave them in the comments.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got Heston Kjerstad back in the big leagues. Jordan Westberg looks like a star in the making. We're going to get to that. But unfortunately, for the second straight week here, Amy, we've got to talk about an Oriole headed to the injured list. And this week it's Austin Hayes, who hits the IL with a left calf strain. Brandon Hyde said he didn't think it would be terribly long that Hayes would be on the injured list. Think he'll be back pretty shortly after that stint. But it's unfortunate. We know the start to the season that Hayes has had. He had hits in back-to-back games before hitting the injured list, which not awesome, but certainly signs of improvement before this injury here.
Yeah, really bad timing for Austin Hayes, as every week on this podcast, you guys talk about Austin Hayes and Colton Cowser and kind of that battle in left field and how Austin Hayes is really fighting for his spot to be in this everyday lineup. So really bad timing for that. I think, especially after those 2 hits and 2 of his 5 hits coming in his last 2 games, his at-bats looked a lot better as of late. So bad timing. I think the good news is that Brandon Hyde did say he doesn't think it's going to be an extended stint on the injured list, and he'll be back pretty soon after he gets off that injured list. And they didn't say it's a grade 2 strain with a set 4 to 6 weeks or 2 to 6 weeks, whatever it may be. You see that a lot of times across baseball. I mean, and a lot of times with outfielders, and they can be kind of nagging injuries, calf strains, and they're kind of unpredictable. You see it with Giancarlo Stanton, players like that. You saw it with Mike Trout, who missed significant time last year. So you just never know, but you're hoping for the best for Austin Hayes, and I think Brandon Hyde saying that, good news.
Yeah, better to be cautionary about this than to have him try to fight through the calf strain and end up having it get worsened, whatever it may be. But this has kind of been the book on Austin Hayes for his career, is whether or not he can stay on the field. He was able to put in 144 games last year, was fighting through some injuries in the second half of the season, which is a large part of why we saw his numbers take a pretty significant dip in the second half. Hayes is a trooper. He's a really tough guy. He tries to fight through these injuries all the time. And it's unfortunate that he's been hit with this again. It's a pretty unlucky season for Hayes. There was the story in Sarasota where he had the stomach virus and apparently dropped 10 pounds. He had another series in Pittsburgh where he was out for a game or 2 because he was under the weather as well. So Austin Hayes I know he's not hitting well and you would like to see more production, but he's just not catching a break right now.
Yeah, if you've been following Austin Hayes' careers in the majors and even dating back to his time in the minors coming up, you find this hard to believe that this is his first IL stint in the last 2 seasons. You find that really hard to believe. You remember the ankle surgery, the thumb injury. He played through an abdominal hernia. He played through the hamstring injury last year. And that's good because that means you have a really tough player. And some of those injuries came from because he plays so hard in the outfield, lays out for balls, makes hard slides, stuff like that. But when you're playing through injuries, you also see the dip in the numbers. Like last year, he fought through that hamstring injury, which is so much better than going on the IL, but you saw the dip in the numbers. 314 the first half was his average, 228 the second half. You saw his OPS dip to 667 after 853 in the first half. He was playing through those injuries, good, but sometimes the results show.
Yeah, and I think last year, without somebody like Colton Cowser as your fourth outfielder, you're probably looking for Austin Hayes to play through those injuries a little bit because he was very firmly one of your top three outfielders. Right now, through the first 25 games of the season, Austin Hayes has played like the fourth best outfielder on the team, quite frankly. Right. Colton Cowser has looked like one of the better players in all of baseball through 25 games. Cedric Mullins has been great. Anthony Santander is still giving you solid power numbers. So it doesn't kill you right now that Austin Hayes is headed to the injured list. Better to be cautionary about it, have him on the IL for a little bit, and who knows? I mean, maybe it'll be a little mental reset as well, just to get back in the box, to be totally healthy, and to get some good swings under his belt.
That's a really good point. I mean, you could live with what Hayes was doing at the plate when he got in against lefties because you had Colton Cowser. You could live with what he was doing because he was still getting what he needed to get done in the outfield. You know, most of his value comes from his defense and speed already, which is when we'll get into Heston Kjerstad. Conversation is interesting because he's the complete opposite.
Sure.
But now especially you can live with him going in the IL because you do have Colton Cowser who's playing just as well and better, really.
Yeah, Colton Cowser is a starting outfielder right now. He's playing every day as he should. And, you know, we'll see what happens when Austin Hayes gets back. What his role is going to look like there, if Cowser continues to play as well as he is, we'll see. But Austin Hayes, for now, headed to the injured list. And as you mentioned, in his place, up comes Heston Kjerstad. 21 games in AAA Norfolk this year, a slash line of 349, 431, 744, with an OPS over 1,100. There's no question that Kjerstad's numbers warranted a promotion. He had 10 home runs, which was tied for the lead in all of minor league baseball, 4 doubles. The power numbers are great, and he looked solid in the big leagues last year, too. Had an OPS right around 750 in the 13 games that he was up last season.
Right, exactly. I mean, he got called up because he deserved it.
Yeah.
He almost deserved to crack this roster after spring training. And then after what he's done over his first few games, leads all of AAA with those 10 home runs, 30 RBI. He deserved to be the next man up. And it worked out really well that he's also an outfielder. I think the only question that kind of comes into the conversation is, why did they bring up another lefty bat?
Yeah, I think that's the question for me here. When you're looking at the numbers on the surface, there's no doubt that Heston Kjerstad deserved to be in the big leagues in some capacity. He was great in the limited time that he had a season ago. He was unbelievable in AAA. There's no question about that. Heston Kjerstad is a big league quality player. However, when you're looking at what the Orioles need right now, it's not really Heston Kjerstad because he's a left-handed power bat who can play a corner outfield. Mm-hmm. And right now you've got Colton Cowser, who is a left-handed power bat. I think you can call Cowser at this point. He can play some center field as well, but you're really looking at Cowser defensively as a solid corner outfielder. You also have Ryan O'Hearn, who is a left-handed power bat, who is a designated hitter, first base hybrid type, but can also play a corner outfield. Cedric Mullins is your starting center fielder. He is a left-handed hitting outfielder. Anthony Santander, switch hitter in right field or DH. If you want to go even deeper into the DH conversation, Adley Rutschman DHs on a lot of days where he needs an off day from catching. James McCann is your catcher. Adley Rutschman is the DH. He is a switch hitter as well. You did not have a need anywhere for a left-handed hitter. Cowser's a lefty. Mullins is a lefty. Santander, switch hitter. O'Hearn, a lefty. Rutschman, a switch hitter. So my question is more so, yes, Heston Kjerstad is a fantastic player, and he is going to contribute to this team when he is up in the big leagues, but where does he fit, and where does he play?
The thing is I think we have to get over the fact that they brought up a player that's going to replace a Hayes type. I mean,
sure.
I think it's going to replace him in the fact that you're not going to see Heston Kjerstad every day in the outfield. I think it's going to be, when he gets in these games, it's going to be off the bench, maybe, or a lot like we saw in the lineup last night where he's playing right field and you see Santander, the only switch hitting bat in this outfield with Austin Hayes out in that DH spot. I think that's how you're going to see him. But we have to kind of get over the fact that it's like a trade for a trade in Austin Hayes.
Yeah, I think there was there was a thought in my mind that we were going to see Ryan McKenna here. However, if you brought up Ryan McKenna, you would have to DFA him again once Austin Hayes got back. So that didn't really work out. But I'm thinking about an Orioles lineup against right-handed pitching. And your outfield is going to be Cowser, Mullen, Santander. More often than not, you have those three guys starting in your outfield. And then your DH is probably Ryan O'Hearn still. With Ryan Mountcastle at first base, I mean, you're not going to platoon Ryan Mountcastle, really.
It made a little more sense when Ryan Mountcastle missed a couple games.
Sure,
Had to bring Heston Kjerstad up. You know he can play first base. Okay, maybe this makes a little bit more sense. Maybe this Mountcastle knee aggravation is a little bit worse than we thought. But you saw him get in the game last night.
Right.
So that it is a little interesting.
Mountcastle's been playing too well to platoon. Even if there is a right-handed pitcher on the mound, Ryan Mountcastle should still be in the starting lineup.
Exactly. I think it just comes down to, I think it would have been a different conversation if you called up Heston Kjerstad at this time last year when your outfield is set and Austin Hayes is playing every day. But he went on the IL not playing every day, and Colton Cowser is in that position, so you don't need a guy to come in and fill the spot of an everyday outfielder, and I think that's what makes the difference, and that's why you can kind of live with bringing up another lefty bat.
Yeah, and it's not a question of whether or not Heston Kjerstad is going to produce. Right. At the end of the day, I think you can look at this decision as just they brought up the best baseball player. Because Heston Kjerstad was putting up the best numbers in AAA Norfolk. He was putting up some of the best numbers in all of minor league baseball. So you can look at the lineup however way you want and say, oh, I don't know if he's going to get in the lineup on these days or these days. But I think the decision just came down to we're trying to win as many baseball games as we can. Heston Kjerstad might be the best baseball player that we can call up right now. So regardless of what the fit really looks like, we're going to call him up because he is a good hitter. And he's going to get in the lineup at some point, and he's going to help you win games.
Right. I mean, and there's not the conversation of, they're finding ways to get Colton Cowser in the lineup.
Yeah.
So, you know what, if Heston Kjerstad comes up and produces, it doesn't matter. They're going to figure it out.
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see, too, once Austin Hayes gets back up, this isn't just Heston Kjerstad is not the type of player that you call up, you send back down, he's back and forth. Michael Elias has said that he doesn't really like having to do that with prospects. So I'll be curious to see what happens with Kjerstad once Austin Hayes is ready to go. If Kjerstad is in the lineup pretty consistently and he's producing, is he the one that gets sent back down to AAA? Do we see maybe the Orioles carry 5 outfielders with Kjerstad staying on this roster? I think that's a question as well because Kjerstad is too good of a prospect to just kind of... It's possible. Again, the Orioles are just trying to win as many games as possible here. They're not super concerned about whether or not the prospect is going to be 100% ready to go if he's getting inconsistent at-bats, whatever it may be. They want to make sure that Heston Kjerstad is up and helping this team, and they're just going to field the best 26 that they can, regardless of whether or not they've got to send a prospect back and forth.
Yeah, it's kind of, you had the question of, is Heston Kjerstad the guy that you want to bring up because he's not going to get everyday at-bats like he was at AAA. So you have that issue, and then a week down the road, maybe 2 weeks down the road, you have the issue of, well, what now when Austin Hayes come back? I mean, he certainly, we weren't at the point where Austin Hayes was, we're moving on yet, so that gives Austin Hayes some, cushion, but it's still going to be a conversation when he comes back. And then moving forward, let's say they do decide to send Kjerstad back down. They don't keep 5 outfielders. You have Austin Hayes coming up, and then he still doesn't produce, 2 weeks further down the road. Then it's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, I think the important part of that Heston Kjerstad conversation to remember is that the Orioles are at a different phase than they were a year ago. They are not still at the point where they are prioritizing prospects development and trying to make sure that they are getting everyday at-bats somewhere or they're getting them enough reps at the big league level, whatever it may be. They're trying to win the AL East here. And if Heston Kjerstad has to go up and down a little bit between AAA and the major leagues in order to win as many big league games as possible, that's what he's going to do because that's where the Orioles are at.
We're not talking about 2 years ago. When, all your focus is on developing these prospects. And it still is. It's always going to be because they have the best farm system in baseball. But you have to win games. That's the number one priority. And that's what it comes down to. And when we talk about Jackson Holliday's, first few weeks in the majors, it's the same conversation. All that matters is winning ball games.
Yeah.
With your top prospects, you give them a little more leeway.
Yeah.
And I think it's a different conversation with Jackson Holliday than it is Heston Kjerstad, and we'll get more into that.
Yeah, well, we will get to Jackson Holliday and that conversation in a little bit. But speaking of winning ball games, one guy who has helped the Orioles do that a heck of a lot lately is Jordan Westberg, who wins American League Player of the Week a week ago, had a 9-game hitting streak that snapped Monday night in LA. Over that stretch, he had 16 hits, 3 homers, 2 doubles, a triple, and 10 RBIs, which is good for a .457 batting average, slugging .829 with an OPS over 1,300. He can play anywhere Brandon Hyde needs him to. We have seen him at third base. We have seen him at second base. He got a few innings at shortstop just to make sure that he was still solid and polished there. The numbers for Jordan Westberg are off the charts. And I think this is really a case of everybody undervaluing what he could do and how well his power would translate from the minor leagues.
Right, exactly. Back-to-back AL Player of the Weeks, not to mention with Colton Cowser and Jordan Westberg this past week. And it seemed like all of Jordan's Westberg's value, or at least what we talked about, even what Brandon Hyde talked about, was his versatility in the field.
Yeah.
He can play second base. He can play third base. He can play shortstop if Brandon Hyde really needs him to. And that's huge when you're calling up these prospects and seeing where they fit in. You have Gunnar Henderson. You have Jackson Holliday set playing everyday second base. So that makes things easier for Jordan Westberg. But they needed that versatility in this time where you're calling up and solidifying positions for these guys. But then you see what Jordan Westberg is able to do at the plate and the power, which you saw the power in the minor leagues. I don't know why. I didn't quite expect it to translate as well as it has.
Yeah.
Especially over the last week. I mean, .478 in those 6 games over this last week with a .913 slugging, 2 home runs, and a stolen base over the last week.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange. It's not like Jordan Westberg isn't a big dude. Like he's a big guy. He's just he's not a prototypical power hitter, really. Him and Colton Cowser kind of fall into a similar category of like bigger than you think they are. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where when Jordan Westberg was coming up through the minor leagues, the book on him was that he's good at everything and not great at one particular thing. You have a lot of Orioles prospects. When you think of power numbers, you think of probably Heston Kjerstad and Kobe Mayo as the 2 guys that are just like, wow, they've got like prodigious power. Those guys can be 30-plus homer type of dudes. But 2 years ago, Jordan Westberg was tied for the organizational lead in home runs down in the minor leagues. He had 27. And the power didn't really come in a prototypical way, which is why I think a lot of people didn't think it would translate all that well. Right. Because most guys, you think of power hitters, I'll keep using Kjerstad and Mayo as an example, but when you think of just a huge home run hitter, you think of Heston Kjerstad from the left side of the plate who's going to make the warehouse worried with his pull side power. Kobe Mayo, same thing. Quick swing. The pull side power is incredible. And when you see Kobe Mayo highlights, it's a lot of he's pulling the ball 450 to the left side. That's not how Jordan Westberg hits home runs. He's going to hit home runs to right center.
Right.
And we've seen it at Camden Yards here a few times. I think he has maybe 1 home run over the left field wall, but he's going to push home runs to right center, that's hard to do. He's a really strong dude to be able to get home runs out that way, but it doesn't make you think, oh yeah, that's an incredible power hitter in the prototypical he's pulling the ball kind of way, but he's pushing it, and it's still powerful, and he's still getting the home runs from it.
Yeah, and that's why the Orioles were leading the league in home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, and it brings up this conversation of, it almost feels like same thing with Cowser. It's like you have to keep moving him further and further and further up the lineup.
Yeah,
and
pretty
it
much.
Makes it really fun for Brandon Hyde.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Westberg too, kind of going back to the fact that this wasn't expected out of him. You look at his scouting grades from a couple of years ago. I mean, the hit tool was, I think, at 50. The power tool was at 55. Yeah. Like, he doesn't have a tool that was graded as a 60 or above, according to scouts. On a 20 to 80 scale, 60 is usually like, that's really good. Mm-hmm. He didn't have anything that was a 60 or above. This was, again, the book on Jordan Westberg was that he is going to be solid everywhere and not great anywhere. He's great everywhere right now.
And a lot of that might be a product of all of our focus has been on the Orioles top picks, rightfully so, but
Yeah.
you're talking about 2 number 1 picks, a number 2 pick, a number 5 overall pick, who should be the topic of conversation. And when this organization is so talented as it is, and we're seeing all these debuts from all of these guys like Jordan Westberg, who that is the book on them, that's the story, they kind of get pushed down the list a little bit. But then when they produce like this, you can't help but ignore it.
Right.
I mean, you can't help but look at it. You can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So Jordan Westberg wins American League Player of the Week a week after Colton Cowser wins American League Player of the Week, which is spectacular for a few reasons. The first of which is just that when you were looking at the Orioles coming into the year, the story was they're going to be led by Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson. And not that Adley and Gunnar aren't playing well, but it's 2 other stars in the making that were drafted in the Michael Elias era over the last few years that are now leading the team. Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser look like the 2 best players on the team through the first 25 games of the season.
Well, and that's what makes a huge difference is it's easy to draft early in the draft. It just comes down to it. Now, do those guys always pan out? Obviously not. We've seen a lot of top picks not pan out. But, that's kind of easy. But when you pick later in the rounds or you guys like Jordan Westberg, you have to kind of hit on those guys to be successful. And now we're seeing the guys that they've hit on later in the draft come up and be big producers in this lineup.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a normal thing to keep happening.
Not at all.
You mentioned that it's easier to pick up high in the draft, and yes, the Orioles have had success drafting guys like Adley Rutschman and Jackson Holliday.
And credit to that.
Yeah, and absolutely, but they should not be as consistent as they have been. This is not a normal thing that is happening. You look at Westberg and Cowser especially. Jordan Westberg was the 30th overall pick in the 2020 draft. And you saw some guys have success from that draft so far. Reed Detmers, Bobby Miller, who was actually the pick before Jordan Westberg in that draft at 29. Jared Jones, Evan Carter. But Jordan Westberg was the 30th overall pick in 2020. And he is producing better than pretty much any of those guys right now.
Well, and let's not forget about just how difficult the 2020 draft was.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Shortened. High school seasons were canceled. College seasons were a whack. It was really hard for not only players, but for scouts as well. Like, you weren't getting your eyes on these guys as much as you wanted. So still the guys at the top of the first round in that draft, those guys, going into the year were predictable. Like, you knew what you were getting out of those guys. You didn't have to scout as hard. But the further you get down and you're looking at pick 30, it's a different conversation. You have to, they had to do a lot more work on that type of player. And to hit on guys late, that says a lot about the Orioles. Plus, I think we're going to see a lot of talent coming from later in those rounds. I think the talent was scattered a little bit more in the 2020 draft, not just because it's shortened, but because it was just a freaking weird year.
Yeah, Jared Jones, Evan Carter, good examples there. But I think that 2020 draft especially, that's where you saw good organizations still make good picks. I mentioned Bobby Miller. He was drafted by the Dodgers with the 29th overall pick. Jordan Westberg was the 30th overall pick. I think you can make the argument right now that those are 2 of the better players that were selected in the top 30. Because, Amy, you said it's easy to draft at the top of the draft. Look at the top 5. Spencer Torkelson has struggled. Max Meyer looked good in his brief stint with the Marlins. They're trying to protect his arm. He's back down in the minors. Austin Martin, who many people thought was going to be the Orioles draft pick, is in the majors. He hasn't looked great. Heston Kjerstad, of course, went 2nd overall in that pick. But then the 2 really good organizations at drafting at 29 and 30 draft Bobby Miller and Jordan Westberg. That's just what the Orioles have been able to do. And with Cowser, too. I mean, Cowser was the 5th overall pick in the draft in 2021. He was not projected to be a top 5 pick. No. Most scouts had him as maybe a 10 to 12 type of pick. And you look at the top of the draft, Henry Davis goes 1st overall, the college catcher out of Louisville. He's got a negative WAR in the big leagues right now. Jack Leiter goes 2nd overall. He made his big league debut a week ago and got shelled. 3rd pick, 4th pick have not made their big league debuts. And then there's Colton Cowser, who's top 10 in baseball and WAR.
On Jack Leiter.
Yeah.
You don't get another chance, Jack.
And then there's Colton Cowser, who went 5th overall, and he's top 10 in baseball and WAR. Right. That's just the Orioles.
And 2021 was another weird year. Still wasn't back to normal. We never saw the draft, the same again after 2020. So 2021 was a weird year again. Colton Cowser, much like Heston Kjerstad, was a surprise. And look what he's doing.
Yeah.
Just like just like Jordan Westberg, back-to-back AL Player of the Week.
And now you're in a position where you're looking at a lineup like last night, and you had 8 guys, including Grayson Rodriguez, who is the pitcher, that were drafted by the Orioles. And the other 2 were Ryan O'Hearn and Anthony Santander, who were... Ryan O'Hearn was acquired for cash considerations from the Royals, and Anthony Santander was a Rule 5 draft pick who had never played above high A.
Yeah. You don't see it.
It's not supposed to be that easy.
You just don't see it. And last night, I think that's what made last night so fun. 7 guys in the lineup that are homegrown, and then another one that was a Rule 5 draft pick that you have to... I mean, the Rule 5 is a great way that the Orioles have found talent, but you have to be talented to hit on those picks too. You see more often than not that they don't work out, and you're like, oh, what do we do here?
Yeah.
Not a huge deal because it's just the Rule 5 draft, but still, for him to be contributing like he has to this team over the last few years is incredible. So 7 guys that were homegrown talent last year. You add Anthony Santander into the conversation, then Grayson Rodriguez on the mound.
Yeah.
It was so cool to see, and the fact that the next day we're not talking about, even though Adley Rutschman had a good game, you see Gunnar Henderson. That's great to see, but we're talking about Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser.
Yeah. Adley, Gunnar, Westberg, Cowser, they all look like stars. They have all been drafted within the last 5 years.
You see the teams that have their top prospect contribute at the big league level. You see that across baseball. You see 2 big names like the Orioles having Gunnar and Adley, but it's the rest of the guys that fill out the lineup that makes this just jump off the page.
Yeah, and again, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but when you compare this Orioles core and what they are doing and have the potential to do to past teams and the success that they have had in the draft, you think about teams like the 2016 Cubs that were built on players that they drafted in Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Javi Baez. I mean, that was the core of that team. Kyle Schwarber. Like, those guys were able to lead the charge for Chicago, and they went out and they got pitching. Houston, Michael Elias and Sig Mejdal, Kyle Tucker, Jose Altuve was somebody that was just kind of a diamond in the rough. Right. Dallas Keuchel was the same way. And then they draft Correa, they draft Bregman. This is how good teams are built. And the Orioles are certainly trending in that direction. And I think if you were to look at this season and predict somebody that was going to be a young star, probably going to be Jackson Holliday. That was outside of Adley and Gunnar, and we have not seen that thus far from Jackson Holliday, and it's still not really killing the Orioles because you have Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser producing in the way that they are.
And that's what it comes down to. Winning cures all, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's not forget that Colton Cowser came up and really struggled last year. Let's not forget about like Gunnar Henderson's first start to the majors. He struggled, not as bad as Colton Cowser did, of course, at the end of last year, but he still struggled. But the Orioles were winning. They were making either, a playoff push, or they were winning at the beginning of the season. They were fun. You can kind of turn your head to the struggles of the other guys.
Yeah.
It doesn't come into play until they come up in a huge moment and it's an automatic out. They're affecting the team in the win and loss columns, and that's when it's going to matter. But right now, they're winning, and Jackson Holliday's struggles at the plate, of course, all of our eyes are on it.
Yeah.
But it's not as big of a deal because of what the rest of the team is doing.
Yeah, let's talk about Jackson Holliday because obviously it is a conversation that needs to be had. He has not been playing the type of baseball that we were expecting from Jackson Holliday. There is a certain amount of struggle that is expected when you make the leap from AAA to the big leagues, even for the number 1 overall prospect in baseball. We have mentioned a lot of times that Adley Rutschman struggled when he first came up for the first month or so of the season. But there is a difference between struggling and what we have seen from Jackson Holliday so far, quite frankly, which is a lot of strikeouts, more than we are accustomed to seeing from him. And he doesn't look as comfortable at the plate as we are expecting. Of course, there are some questions as to whether or not, he might need some time back in AAA to get his confidence back up or what the plan is with Holliday. I think my takeaway from it is, as you mentioned, it's not hurting the Orioles in the win or loss column right now. The Orioles are still playing so well because 1 through 8 are delivering, and Jackson Holliday is able to work through the struggles a little bit in the 9 spot. He's got more eyeballs on him than any 9 hitter in baseball far and away. The pressure is immense for Holliday as the top prospect, as a 20-year-old, phenom type of player. Yes, he is struggling, And yes, I think it is unexpected to an extent, but it also makes sense. And we have seen him over the last few games too. We saw last night, had a hit and was able to get some harder contact on the ball. Like it's starting to happen a little bit, and I think he's going to get there. And we should not expect this 20-year-old to hit the ground running in the way that a lot of people were hoping for.
Right. I think the biggest concern that comes from Jackson Holliday's at-bat so far are the at-bats himself. You look at the average and you're like, ooh, that is not pretty.
Yeah.
But then if you look at what he's really doing in the at-bats, I think that's way more important at this stage in the game. But he didn't look good. He didn't look comfortable. I feel like every time he went to tune into his at-bat, he was down 0-2 in the count.
Yeah.
His swings and misses were not good. It's like he couldn't catch up to stuff. His at-bats didn't look good. But the more and more he goes up to the plate, the more comfortable he gets. You saw it last night. He hadn't made any hard contact. Even his hit was like a little dribbler. But last night you saw that hit. I think it was 104 off the bat.
Yep.
That's much better. That's what we like to see. And then it's like he rounded first, and it's like he had a smile. He was trying to hide the smile on his face, and it was like, and then you saw him make that nice play. I think it was in the 6th inning last night where he made the nice catch, doubled the guy off first. He smiled. I think it's a matter of being comfortable and the stress of the situation for him, because we know what he can do. We know his skill set.
Oh, the talent's not a question.
Prospect in baseball.
Yeah.
He knows the talent. He's going to do it. That's not a question. It's just, why isn't it happening yet? And the only thing that it can really come down to is just the stress and the how much the game has sped up for him over the last few weeks.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people underestimate the jump from AAA to the big leagues. Everyone says the jump from AAA to the big leagues is double the jump from AA to AAA. Every time you move up a level, that jump gets bigger. And Jackson Holliday moved up through the minor leagues quicker than we have seen really anyone in this organization move up in a very, very long time. So struggles were expected and they were anticipated. I think there was the one at-bat that a lot of people look back to in Kansas City where it was a 2-strike count and Holliday just took a sinker down the middle, and everyone was like, whoa, he might be in his head a little bit here. And yesterday, I think we saw, as you mentioned, it's nice to see the smiles. Okay, Jackson Holliday got a reminder last night that he can smack a ball 104 mile an hour and get a base hit. He has that kind of talent. He has that kind of ability. And yes, I understand the argument of maybe get him back down to AAA, get his confidence up, this or that. I really think the confidence is only going to come if he starts succeeding at the big league level. Because he can go back down to AAA and hit 400, but if he's not succeeding at the big league level, the confidence isn't really still there. He's got to get it done up here.
Right. I don't think that works for some guys. You send them down, they get their mojo back, they come up, they hit. But that wasn't the issue here. He's not seeing the same pitching he was when he hit 685 his senior year in high school.
Yeah.
He's not seeing the same pitching he was when he hit 333 in 10 games this year at AAA. That wasn't the issue. He was fine. He was confident. He was hitting at AAA this year. I don't think if you send him back down at this point for his own benefit, we're just talking about Jackson Holliday right now, not the team's benefit, but Jackson Holliday, I don't see how that's going to help him. He's going to go down there. He's probably going to hit. Now, if he goes back down there and doesn't hit, then we have a whole different bag of problems. But he's going to go down there and hit. So I don't see how that helps him. You have to let him work it out. Now, it's a different conversation if we're talking he starts to infringe on the team's success.
Yeah.
Then you have to send him back down to figure things out. That's a different conversation.
Sure. And I think when you're filling out the lineup card every day, Jackson Holliday is still your best option against right-handed pitching at second base. I don't think that's a question based on the talent. Even with the struggles, I think Jackson Holliday still deserves to be in the lineup every day. Not for nothing, we have heard a lot of players over the last few seasons talk about the benefits of struggling a little bit at the big league level. Colton Cowser talked about it last year where he was struggling a ton in the big league level. He needed to learn how to do that. Colton Cowser did not look good a season ago. He looks really good in 2024. I don't know Jackson Holliday's Little League stats, but I would have to imagine that this is the first extended period of time where Jackson Holliday has struggled in his baseball career because we didn't really see it anywhere in the minor leagues. He had slow stretches in maybe his first 15, 20 at-bats, but we didn't see it for 10, 15 games in AAA Norfolk, again, where he started slow a little bit, but didn't start slow like this. this might be the first time in his baseball career where he is really facing some struggles in terms of how he's able to play, and he's got to figure out how to work through that. That's a valuable thing for any big leaguer to be able to work out. And once Jackson Holliday breaks out of this and starts playing like the number one prospect in baseball and starts playing up to the ability that we know he has, I'm sure he's going to be able to look back and say, I needed to go through that to figure out what headspace I need to be in, what I need to do to improve and move forward and get better.
That's the game of baseball, right? You're going to fail and you're going to go through really bad slumps sometimes.
Yeah.
And Jackson Holliday hasn't dealt with that in what we've seen in his whole career, dating back to high school baseball. So it might not be the worst thing for him. The really good thing is that it's happening now, right? He's making his major league debut. It's the first few weeks of his whole major league career. I'd much rather him figure it out and not be so great at the plate now than the middle of the season.
Sure.
Or at the end of the season when they're fighting for another title. Like, this is good to figure out now. And you're talking about the best players in baseball's history that have struggled in their first few weeks. Even going back to Griffey's, first few weeks of the season. Alex Bregman won for his first 32. People go, even Julio Rodriguez, if you remember a few seasons ago, coming up struggling. So it happens.
And this season, too, a little bit for J-Rod. Yeah.
What'd you say?
And this season, too, for J-Rod. It happens. And like you said, you would much rather have Jackson Holliday struggle in April than struggle in August.
The one thing I will say, the schedule's only getting harder. Like, he has seen the Red Sox, the Twins, the Angels, like, they eased him into it here. I mean, it's not like he's seen, the hardest teams in baseball. It's only getting harder from here. The Yankees come to town next week, and then let's not even talk about the month of June yet. We'll deal with that.
Whoever came up with the schedule for the Orioles for the month of June was just mean.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got the Rays, Blue Jays, Rays again, Braves, Phillies, Yankees, Astros, Guardians, and Rangers. That's the month of June. So you would like to have Jackson Holliday good and rolling when June comes along.
Only one off day.
Yeah.
That is just brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Well, we can talk about that in June. We don't need to worry about it right now. Yeah.
But anyway, that's going to be tough. So let's hope he has it all figured out by then. He doesn't need to go down to AAA and it all works out. But it's a good time for him to figure it out because they're winning, and it really hasn't affected the team yet. Yeah,
and last night, again, you saw a hard hit ball for a single from Jackson Holliday. I think it is a sign of good things to come, and I think we're going to look back at this stretch in a few months as just a blip on the radar.
Well, yeah, and 30 couple at-bats, it's kind of significant sample size, but it's still small in the big picture. Yeah. And if he was absolutely demolishing baseballs right now, all of Baltimore in the country would say he is the best baseball player to ever walk the planet.
Yeah.
He would. But you know what? He's not. And now it's like, chaos. But it's only 33 at-bats.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And again, we could be looking back in 10 years and have Jackson Holliday in the conversation with, remember when Jackson Holliday started 1 for 32 and now he's made 7 consecutive All-Star games? Like,
same thing.
It might not matter.
People were calling to send Gunnar Henderson down last year. People, Colton Cowser.
There were people asking about Adley.
Yeah. It happens. It
happens. Let's all breathe. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. That'll just about wrap things up for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you for following along with us live on YouTube and Facebook, despite some of our audio technical difficulties here. We're working through them. We're trying here.
Trying to whistle in the microphone.
Exactly. That's all it was. We are live every week, live at 11 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure you follow along, comment along, all of that good stuff. Or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Bobby Blanco behind the scenes for producing this one. For Amy Jennings, I'm Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.